that long ago that you and I
Sorry.
it
Go
wasn't
ahead.
that it wasn't that long ago that you and I met at an event and we just clicked like that and had the deepest conversations right there in the midst of the event hall and have kept things moving since there, and here we are.
Yes, indeed. And that's kind of weird too, you don't generally meet people in the midst of a huge, to me, it was huge. There were like 500 people there. And, I was fortunate to have been drawn to your booth, and you weren't even there at the time. And I got a chance to look around and see some stuff. And then you popped up. It was like you came out of nowhere. And we started this conversation that has led us on a path of collaborating and working with each other, and just taking things like this and the work that we do out into a bigger audience called the world. And I'm so grateful for you agreeing to be on the show. And just let's take a little time and tell everyone a little bit more about you and your journey towards your focus on the occupational therapy, and more interestingly, the energy work that you're focusing on now.
Yes, absolutely. So it really started when I was 12 years old, believe it or not. These budding teens, 12 years old, it's amazing what goes on inside, right? And so I was seeing everybody in my family having a place and having a direction and having a gift that was coming forward. And I just was having this existential crisis of I don't know what that is for me, and I don't know if I'll ever know what it is because I don't think I'm that skilled at anything. Of course, I was only 12, but and so a light bulb went off, and it was like, you are to be the best person who you can be. And I was like, okay, that's it. And that guided me through, it's always guided me. It's always like very present with me. I'm not necessary. I wasn't someone who was like, okay, then what is that? What is it that I should be doing to get there?
Hmm.
It just started unfolding. It just started unfolding. And so, by the time I figured out after three majors, I decided to go into occupational therapy and learned everything I could possibly learn about the human body. I had to do anatomy and physiology, and it was a pre-med course, so you had to learn everything that was out there on the body. And then plus the occupational therapy courses, graduated, started working with people, and totally felt like an imposter and that I didn't know what I really needed to know to help these people, which is kind of an interesting place to land after that much education, that much training, that much practice, because we had practicals that we had to go on.
Hmm.
And so I just tried to deal with the anxiety of that and relaunch my learning. And over the years, I traveled far and wide, traveled with mentors, traveled to get to mentors, and most of those mentors um, were spiritual mentors, really. And they were the keepers of their knowledge. So whether it was the Native American or um, the Eastern cultures around the yogic philosophy and practice, not so much the posture yoga, but meditation, contemplation, the path towards enlightenment, working with the Tibetan Bon, working with spiritualists, going through extensive training with all of these people. Started off with Qigong, actually. And all of them were, when you talk about spirit and you talk about energy, you can't separate it out. It's
Hmm.
just, it's just part of that inner process of that very subtle aspect of not just ourselves, but of nature, of life, of everything. And so that was how it. What was the other part of your question?
Yeah, I think you took us there. You brought us through how it started and into the work that you're doing now. And I think one of the most intriguing parts for me to know is some of the studies that you did abroad with some of the teachers that you had the opportunity to study with and under. And, even now, knowing that that has been years since then, it's like, one of my thoughts was, I wonder how they would equate how you've progressed on your journey to, others along the path, and how so many of those that they teach are now doing this work. And I just want to again say that I am really grateful that I've got an opportunity to help others to hear and be a part of and learn and grow in this respect too. And thank you again for being
My
here.
pleasure, my pleasure. It's a heavy burden to carry a lot of indigenous knowledge, and I'm not just talking about Native American. I'm talking about all of those traditions were indigenous traditions from the lineage holders, and it's becomes like a burden if you don't have an outlet for it. It's like it's so precious that there has to be a way to infuse it not only into your own life but back out in service. And so without these opportunities and without my clients, I would I don't know what I would do.
I totally get it. I totally
Yeah.
get it. You're right. As a certified hypnotherapist and the clients that I work with, I feel like my being able to help them and pour into them is what also helps me. But I realize that the energy goes far wider than all of that. Yeah. Um,
That was the trick of spirit from very early on. It was like, okay, you don't feel like you have enough knowledge or experience to help the people that are in front of you, then let's take you on this journey around the world and get this other education and training that was actually more beneficial than the college education in so many ways.
yeah.
And in that process, I I practiced all of those things. I did all of those things for myself because that was either part of the training or it was directed towards, okay, you have to be able to do this. You have to be able to navigate through this whole thing. And then I was able to apply it, whether I was reducing pain for somebody or I was teaching them a new way to look at things or to shift their energy around something. So I always integrated it back with clients wherever I could. But it required me to do the work, and guess what? I got the benefits because so this is the health connection with this. You know, the health connection is that if you don't have that coherency between what your soul wants you to do, what your soul says you're here to do, and what you're doing and being in the outer world, it creates health problems. And I had a very sensitive system. And so I started having medical problems, I guess you could say, even as a young child. And then we would clear that up. And then, you know, around early teenage, something else would pop up. And then by the time I got into college, something else would pop up. And they were all related, you know, and, and again, it was also a learning experience because the solution that was being presented was medication, long-term medication. And at that time, now we're going back into the early 70s, nobody was talking about stress and the impact of stress, or very few people were talking about the impact of stress
Hmm.
on the physical body and how it creates health issues. So I was always interfacing and going, oh, I can do my own treatment plan here with all these energy practices and get off my medication, and I did. And I resolved the problem. The problem no longer existed. The medication was useful because it got me through that initial phase of, oh, I feel miserable, help me. and get me to a place where I was stable enough to then do these practices and do my own work to resolve the issue that created in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And there are so many of us who actually know that there is an underlying cause, but we're in a state of such fear sometimes. What's that going to show me? What am I going to have to deal with?
Yep.
And we would rather say, let me just put that to the side for right now and think that it's not being addressed until it shows up again really huge. And that's one of the things that I want us to talk about today. But, you know, this is right there in what I wanted us to kind of move into, which is about your approach to the healing arts. Um, how are you seeing your or this approach of energy healing and, you know, getting to the root of things, making a difference in the lives of the healthcare providers and coaches and body workers and all of our clients?
Absolutely. So, you know, two things. One is that I'm always looking through the lens of energy. Why? Because it's the subtlest thing, you know, when you start getting down to the quantum level, you kind of almost at least reach the bottom of the source of everything. You're close. So to me, if I can look at something energetically, it tells me so much more than if I'm just looking at the external symptoms. And so it gives us a way deeper way to resolve something. You know, if you can keep, you know, if you just, you know, if you put bad gas in the car, I can remember being a kid and driving and all of a sudden sputter, sputter, sputter. And it turned out that I had some water in my tank somehow, bad gas or whatever. And you can take that bad gas out, or you can spray in some stuff to compensate or to pour in some things to kind of compensate for that and get the car to run. But if you keep going back to the same gas station and you're not changing out to a better gas, you're still going to have the problem, right? So we have to get to whatever's underlying and keep going deeper and deeper. Well, for a lot of, you know, many, if we're not dealing with some of the physical problems, so many people that are trying to move their life forward, trying to move their business forward, they feel some kind of resistance or some kind of wall. It seems like it's just out of reach. I just can't get there. I can't. I'm just don't feel like the person that can do it. And so when all of these things start coming up, it's like, okay, we need the owner's manual. It's like, who taught us, who gave us the owner's manual on how the mind really works, on how the mind interfaces with the body, and how all of that interfaces with your energy and your spirit, and putting it all together and seeing how all of these things impact. So mindset is a pretty surface approach to dealing with the mind. And when you learn how the different parts of the mind, and in the yogic philosophy, there's 4 parts, and it finally makes sense. It's like, okay, getting triggered stops being such a mystery.
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the triggering, would you like to hear more about triggering?
Yeah, I think we all have a sense of what triggering is defined as. Although, you know, what I've learned is you can't always rely on understanding the definition. It's about the experience and relating to the experience to really know.
Yes.
So,
So
yes.
so what would you mind sharing, like what it's like for you to be triggered?
Um, for me, being triggered is when something actually surfaces that tells me that it's requiring my attention. And it could be an emotion, an emotional reaction to something, a physical reaction to something, but it's something that comes out of me that is front and center enough for me to recognize that I am not in my optimal state of being.
Yes. And so there's different levels of triggering. Like there can be like an almost like an everyday undercurrent of a trigger that keeps playing out where, say, not you specifically, but where the energy is the person disperses or shrinks or leaks energy because there's a fear around being seen. There's a fear about being heard. There's a fear about being judged. There's whatever that is. And it can come from some kind of really big trauma or a bunch of little tiny things when you were growing up. It could go to past lives. It could, there's all these reasons why it could be there. But if you've lived with it, if it started when you were young and you lived with it and lived with it, and now you're an adult, you're like, why is this still here? Well, it becomes habitual and it becomes a part of your energy pattern of how you express. So however you contain or disperse or operate your energy, it's going to shift. It's going to shift your facial expressions. It's going to shift the amount of energy that you bring to a situation, the amount of presence you come to with a situation, the amount of connection you're able to establish with somebody, the amount of grounding that you have so that people feel like you're a reliable source of information. Your even just your little tics and habits can be a result of that. So it shapes your the way you walk, your posture, everything. So there's an experience, whether it's one big one or a bunch of chronic ones, and then there's this expression of it in the whole body. It's like the whole body is the whole body. It's holistic, means that it's all connected and everything relates to one another. And so it operates as a whole, and the whole body gets a shift via the energy. And so how can we work through that triggering and work through that habit of how you're operating? That is really the source of, you could say, well, it's my trauma. Yeah, it's the trauma, but the trauma happened a long time ago. It's not happening right now. So, or the bad experience, or whatever you want to call it. And so, but how do you shift how you are now in relationship to life and relationship to yourself and go, okay, the trauma's here, I am well aware of that, and I've done enough healing work that it's time for that to be over. So there's a learning, it's learning to recognize and operate your own system in terms of what you're thinking that triggers the energy shift or the habit of that energy pattern, and to actually learn how to shift into and embody the whole body with your energy. It's like, if you've ever been around, I had the great extreme pleasure of showing up at a hotel. I was actually there for a week-long workshop, and the Miami Dolphins showed up. And before their Monday game on Sunday, they would show up and they would do a meet and greet in the lobby and all this stuff. And I had no idea they were going to be there. And I came down from my room and was going to go get something to eat. And as soon as the elevator doors opened, it was like this blast of energy came at me. And it was like this really palpable, physical, very juicy energy, right? And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was the whole team, the whole Miami Dolphins team right there in front of me. And they were going around shaking everybody's hands and introducing themselves. And that degree of magnetism, they had all cylinders on. You don't play a football game like they do, like any team does. And that if you're not charged up on all cylinders and operating all cylinders on all levels, you're going to get hurt and you wouldn't even be there on the field, so you have
Mm-hmm.
to have that. And
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's that charged up, they've got the muscle mass, they've got the bone alignment, they've got the agility, all of that stuff, and they grounded and powered up, and you feel it. It's different. It's a very magnetic kind of thing, and you start drawing good things into your life.
Wow. To think we started out talking about triggers to having and emitting that kind of energy. It does make a difference. It makes a huge difference. And it's really great to know because, um, we talked about going from triggered to informed. And I think that we've kind of covered that triggered to informed, but let's talk about awakening to the process of change. I would imagine that on this timeline of triggered to informed, there's change that already starts to show up, get integrated into life, and then there's more that occurs so that any trigger can get turned off, because ultimately that's what we want, right? We want the
Yes.
triggers to stop being triggers. And so what does it mean exactly? Or what do you want people to think as they hear awakening to the process of change in the midst of being triggered and going to informed?
So, triggered to informed is about being able to um, come to the place where and I'm going to answer your question, but I want to link the two together, is where you realize that you are being triggered. In other words, you're reacting bigger than the actual individual event that just happened, is typically how it looks. You're overreacting instead of being in a curious and then a responsible responding kind of thing. So first you have to get into that place where you're actually recognizing that something's a trigger, and then the informed part is to really start listening to yourself. And so there's a process that I use to help people um, get really good at noticing when something is first arising in the body, first arising out of the subconscious of the mind, so that you're catching it before it gets way out to speech and what you're saying and what you're doing and how you're reacting. So you can change the outcome from reaction to response. And then let's see, the second part we were talking about it to informed, and then from informed to
The process of change.
process of change. So the process of change, when you're working with these things, is that we have to be willing to change.
Yeah.
So only about 1% of the brain actually stores memory. Like there's so much around the mind versus the brain. And for a long time, people thought that the brain was actually the mind. But even back since the 70s, they started talking about the field that it's carried in. And with quantum physics and that kind of thing being much more well known now, we know that there's information in the space, there's information transmitted. For goodness sake, radio waves get transmitted, right? They're an invisible information that travels on a wavelength that we can't even see, but it comes through and gets picked up by a wire and comes out your box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we forget about that, but that's what's going on. So the informed part is in the change information changing. We have to let off of the resistance. But mostly we don't even know the resistance is there. And so there's nothing like a good challenge to get you to start looking at yourself and go, oh, is that what I'm doing? So you have to be willing to slow down and really look at when something's not working, like look at, well, what's my part in this? And what are the parts of me that are very habitual, that are operating out of the subconscious over and over and over again? And we think that's who we are. And at some place, to get really good at this, you have to realize you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, you're not your body, you're pure consciousness if you allow yourself to access that and be, merge with that. And that from that consciousness, we can change like that. But the ego mind is in there going, no, I'm top dog here. Nobody's taken over. Part of the owner's manual is that you realize that the body, that we were created, we were formed with all of these automatic functions, tons of automatic functions. Without them, this human unit would literally go down, like a computer would go down. And if you look at computers and you look at anything mechanical or rockets going up into space, there's all these foolproof backup systems to ensure that if there's one small glitch, the whole system doesn't go down. And that's how we're built. We're built with all of these automatic functions, and the subconscious is a good example of that. If we're not going to get conscious enough to make conscious decisions and make conscious good decisions, the default is that the subconscious is going to go, she needs protection. She needs to slow down. She needs to do this. And all of these, even if it's like a lot of resistance. So that's what's at play most of the time until we realize that we can take the horse by the reins, literally, and build our consciousness and our vibration to a level where we can recognize these operations of the mind, body, spirit, energy, and actually shift them ourselves or decide something different, to choose to make really conscious choices and to train the subconscious mind that it's not top dog, and you need to shift around what I want, what the soul wants, what the higher order wants.
Ego wants. That is so interesting because I can personally relate to that. And I've worked with small groups and a couple of clients on really coming into that realization as well. And I'm looking at, there are several reasons for the resistance, and you talked about it a little, but I want to jump into it really a little more deeply, because I think that when people understand what some of those reasons are, when this stuff does come up for them, they're more apt to say, oh, that's just that. And then be able to keep that forward movement. In particular, I would ask this question. What do you think is the number one reason why business owners or anyone would have a hard time realizing the connection between energy and flow and health versus, wanting to stay in the same place and say, I'll deal with it later, or it doesn't really bother me when it really does? What's the number one reason why they're resistant to recognizing the resistance?
There's actually a lot of contributing factors to that, but I would say a very personal one for people is their fear. So the folks that are sensitives,
Mm, mm-hmm,
there's a whole group of people that are sensitive
mm-hmm,
that are actually a very small percentage of the population, and the rest of the people are like, we look at them and we're like, well, it's like there can be a communication gap because somebody who really feels something and feels a lot and someone else is totally oblivious to it, they don't get what you're experiencing because they're not experiencing it. And so typically the sensitive folks are the ones who can be a little bit more trapped in feeling like a victim and having some issues around the triangle of codependence and all that stuff. But it also means that they're tend to be more like they realize that there's something else that they need to learn, and so they go after it. And then somebody who doesn't experience that, and they experience the world more from just the physical nature of the world, and they don't have as much of an internal and emotional response to things and a inner knowing or some of those other sensitivities, then they if they haven't been shown to go inward and to get to know themselves deeper and to do more reflection, it can be a very scary thing. It can be very scary, and also kind of like they kind of view it as kind of weird because they experience the physicality of life and not so
mm-hmm,
much the other aspects that some other folks experience.
mm-hmm,
And it doesn't mean they can't. They
mm-hmm,
just need to be shown how
mm-hmm,
and be open to you know turning. Part of this is culture because we're so trained from very early on, and everybody was raised with TV at this point, and radio, and billboards, and now electronic billboards, and flashing things coming up, ads constantly coming up on the computer. And it's all about the material world. And so we're trained to orient outwards towards the material world and get as much as we can as if that's going to make us happy. And then when people generally get as much as they can get and they're still unhappy, they're like, well, crap, what's that about? And then they might start asking and go, maybe there's something else, but I don't know how to get there. So maybe I should go ask somebody. And that whole process then is about turning your attention back into a reflection, but not just reflection, but to really sink through the layers of yourself and get to know a much deeper you that taps into the creative, divine, and connection with spirit and so forth.
awesome. Well, I'm gonna shift us for a little bit to talking about the health industry and the changes that are, I think, very, very, very subtle right now, but still, we're in a better place today than we were 10 years ago. Um, and certainly better than, 2 decades ago, but we've still got such a long way to go. There's it's like the Titanic not running towards an iceberg, but still being so friggin' hard to turn. And so tell us a little bit about what you see in the healthcare system and the shifts that are being made, especially as it relates to those doing holistic and alternative medicine.
Yeah, so there's more and more of that around. You still have to look for it. But even some hospitals are offering, maybe they're offering some form of energy work to, and a lot of it is still aimed towards making patients comfortable and that sort of thing. And acupuncture and, you know, I am aware of people who go and have surgery with just acupuncture instead of the anesthesia. because they know it works, and people wouldn't do it if it didn't work, because otherwise you're in for a lot of pain. So there are, there's inroads here, there, and everywhere. But you know what? It's all about the money. They're big, big systems. And every big system on this planet is about money, because you can't operate without it. Now, the degree of greed, or the degree of, things that are going on that are not helpful to the community at large, is another issue. But a business is a business, and it has to be able to operate. And so if the dollar is where it's at, as we as consumers request, I'm not going to say demand, but if we request and we seek out those services that are taking dollars away from traditional medicine, that's when you get their attention. And that's when they start. And that's actually when they started including some complementary medicine traditions or practices into hospital settings, into hospice, into cancer centers, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest and brightest shifts for me was seeing how and when some, local but major hospitals decided that they might not throw out the traditional menu, but they would allow patients to elect if they wanted, a vegetarian meal versus, the whole sugared down, gravied over meals that
Yes.
traditional hospitals serve. And I think that that was a huge affirmation for the move to, I want to say, move to a whole plant lifestyle, and allowing people who are already living that to continue that versus taking them even farther down the illness cycle. Because that's what we've been seeing. A lot of people go to hospitals or go to traditional medical facilities and leave with things that actually end up making them worse. And what would you tell people? What do you see is our responsibility in all of this?
Oh, we have to get out of the place of, and this is like a double-edged sword. Like, we have to get out of the mindset of someone's going to take care of us. And yet, we have to surrender to good care. But you're not going to be rescued and have it all done for you properly unless you're your own advocate. You have to be your own advocate. We can't just go blindly and not take any responsibility because we revere the medical community. You know what? There's so much about the medical community that we should revere that nobody's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to it breaking down within the system, that's really the problem. The majority of the problems are in the system, not in the individual providers that are wanting to do good. Because rarely do you run into somebody in the medical field who is just a slacker and is just in it for the money, right? There's not that much money in it, let me tell you. So there's a select few who are making money, and it's not even, the doctors aren't even making as much as the select few, and you probably know who those are. So, so we have to decide we're gonna take responsibility. Remember I said you need to know the owner's manual? Well, you need to get enough knowledge and training. And that's what I focus on with my people. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you the owner's manual. I'm not going to keep you dependent on me forever. I'm going to teach you about your mind. I'm going to teach you about how your body and your energy works and how to shift things and how to get better. So you have to get with somebody to learn enough about yourself, and don't rely on Google. Because there's a lot of stuff, if you don't know about medicine, you probably won't be able to pick out the errors or the biases that are being presented. So you have to be really careful. There's a lot of good stuff on Google, but there's also trash on Google. So, and I'm not bashing Google, whatever research, um, you know, what do you
Yeah.
call them? The
The,
machines on the internet
the,
that go
the,
research things.
yeah, the bots, the AI that's
Yeah,
there. You
yeah,
search for stuff, it's going to give you stuff that's set up for you to search and find. And it is, I agree, up to us to determine what's reliable and what isn't. And sometimes you have to go through quite a bit before you really can cull it down to this is reliable information. There are some sources, and I've read a lot of articles from the National Institute of Health, NIH, and I have found that basically these are medical professionals who are writing papers based on their beliefs, and they're written in a way that supports whatever it is that they want it to support. And, you know, I have also learned about doing research that you want to pull from several sources so that as you're pulling the information in and asking for discernment, some of the energy that we've talked about, you can ask for an energy of discernment as you're doing this kind of research. But I totally agree. And we do have a responsibility. It's up to us to advocate for our own health and lifestyles and know that we all deserve the best. And, how we get it is based on, how's that saying go? The squeaky wheel is what gets the grease.
yeah.
And it holds true in so many aspects. And so, Melinda, thank you. I have so loved being in the conversation and then watching you put your oils on. What was coming to you then as you were thinking, about the energy around you, putting on the oil?
The oil. I'm not sure I put oil on.
Oh,
What were you referring to?
well, you just look and you put something behind your ears.
Oh, I was.
Oh, that was your earring?
I think I was fidgeting.
Oh,
It wasn't that esoteric, but you know what? I love what you were saying. We all need to not only do some reading, but have some allies that you can run things by, who can either help you make some discernments or validate what the article says or not. But you also have to be. Everybody wants to be an expert on everything right now, whether they have any knowledge about it whatsoever, because everybody's opinion just counts as knowledge these days. And that's a trap. That's a that's big trouble. That's big trouble for every part of your life. So make sure you pick the allies who actually have an understanding, have some training, have some expertise in an area before you start asking for somebody's opinion. So somebody who, I recently allied with a physician who's a naturopathic endocrinologist. He's brilliant. He researches like crazy, and he's always discovering new things about things that we thought we knew all along that are now outdated. They're just outdated, and so you have to have reliable sources that you go to that you know are current, that are cutting edge, that are knowledgeable, that have a scientific mind. Science is the study of how things work. And so it's not voodoo and it's not pretend, it's like a real thing. Can can research be botched or can it be biased? It absolutely can, but that's where the discerning comes in, and learning how to read a research paper and be able to work with what you're getting.
also part of that process of change, right?
Yep.
Wow. Well, Melinda, I do one last thing, and you have shared such amazing wisdom and knowledge with us already. Is there one more thing that you'd like to share with our audience, that something that you want us all to walk away with and say, you know, Melinda Broadstone gave that to us? What would that be?
Oh, I had something earlier and now I'm thinking, maybe something different. Well, first of all, I'd like to offer for all of you to take the energy style that I created, the energy style quiz, because it will help you connect how you're acting in the world with what might be going on with your energy. And so it's a way for you to start connecting the two and starting the process of a more subtler awareness of yourself and how you operate. Why? So that you can have a better life, so that you can respond differently, so that you can get out from the triggers, so that you can become empowered, so that you can really start moving you're moving on your path. You know, I hear from a lot of people, well, I don't really think I have a path. Well, we all have a path. We're all supposed to get to be better human beings, and everybody has a uniqueness to them that is often covered over, layered over with all of the habits and the subconscious stuff, and you can get at it. You can get at it. So I would say take the quiz, and I think you're going to make that available.
I am going to post it on the page, right in the comments box.
It is called mbroadstone.com /5-energy-style/ and that'll take you right to the quiz. But meanwhile, also, it's like one of those vaporized things. It was there and then it wasn't, and then it was there and then it wasn't. Oh gosh, this was cool too. So it's really about, oh, this is what it is. That's why, because it's a whisper.
Okay.
I want you to start listening to the whisper that's coming from inside you. That little tiny voice. And that's the voice of, you could call it intuition, you could say your soul's talking to you, your wisdom is talking to you, but it's from deep inside of you. And that is probably the wisest place, and the place where you're going to get the direction of that path, that purpose, and getting to your uniqueness. So that would be a great starter thing to work on, or to play with, really, just to play with.
I love that. And thank you on behalf of our audience for the 5 energy styles quiz. I happened to take it, and I honestly just looked at it going in saying, let me just see what it ends up telling me. And it was so on point, such valuable information that I am certain that every one of our audience members who grabs it will have a gem. Thank you so much. And you will also be able to see how else you can link up with Melinda. Her Facebook page will also be on the thread. And I want to say to our audience, I hope that you enjoyed our show today as much as I did being a part of it. And let us know what you'd like to hear more about. We can only do that when you let us know. So PM me, send me an email. You've got all my information. And if you're a health, wisdom, or wealth practitioner, and you'd like to share your knowledge and expertise with our audience, to be in this conversation, reach out to me. Let me hear from you. You can email me, you can message me on Facebook, email me at vlyn@p3academy.com. Let's connect. And everyone, once again, thanks for joining us today. We've got some exciting things coming up in future episodes. And more than that, if you enjoyed this episode, share it. Share it out into the world. We are here to make a difference and make a bigger positive impact in the world. And we need you to help us do that. Turn on your notifications and be a part of everything that's happening now and that's going to be happening. And again, share. But until next time, thank you for joining us today. Be well, live, love, and be a bigger positive impact maker in your world. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.